we're going to start the morning off with Ben Connor. And Ben comes to us from Williamsburg, Virginia, and I know not all of us maybe are drawn to adolescents, but Ben definitely is, and we all should be, and he'll tell us why that's the case. But he has spent the last 20 years doing ministry with young people with and without developmental disabilities. And he joined us last year at Gettysburg for an engaging presentation where he shared a glimpse into his new book that just came out this summer, Amplifying Our Witness, Giving Voice to Adolescents with Developmental Disabilities. And no debate about it, this book is a gift, definitely is a gift. And so he's really calls us, I think, to a new vision of inclusive youth ministry, and he'll share a bit about that this morning. He is here with his wife, Melissa, and left 4 kids behind, anxious to get back, but you're in for a compelling presentation. So, Ben, come join us.
So when you're doing sort of public speaking stuff, you're supposed to get people engaged early, right? And so a lot of times it can be just a question that's easy to answer. So maybe an easy question could be, is disability a gift? No, I'm just kidding. We won't start with that. We'll start with this, though. The title. What in the world does that mean? Amplification. Right now my voice is being amplified. If there's no voice, nothing can be amplified. So there's something there. So amplification suggests that in this time I spend with adolescents with developmental disabilities, that there's something there that's of great value that our churches and community need to be aware of. My role as someone who spends a lot of time with them is to from sharing life with them, help our community to see what those things are. So amplification. R is an important word because it changed last year in Gettysburg, right before I gave an evening presentation, because the original title was Their Witness. But after sharing the time together with everyone, I thought, well, that's nonsense. It's Our Witness, because my whole book and my whole point is about community, about giftedness. So I say, all of us have different ways of expressing our humanity, of participating in the image of God, and as people who participate in the image of God, we are all given gifts for the edification of the community. So it's our witness. But witness is a tricky word because we're actually bearing something that is of someone else. We're bearing the witness of the Spirit. And so witness suggests that, I came into the disability discussion from a weird place. My doctoral work is in Mission Ecumenics History of Religion. That's in the history department where I got my degree. My dissertation was on practical theology. My interest is in youth ministry. I'm writing on disability studies. No wonder I don't have a job yet. But the important thing about witness is that we do bear this witness of the Spirit as signs, instruments, and foretastes of the kingdom of God. So witness is important to the ministry that I participate in. You don't have to have certain capacities to bear the witness of the Spirit. And then discipleship and ministry with adolescents, not to or for, but with, believing that they have a capacity, God-given, Spirit-nourished, to participate as vital members of the body of Christ. And adolescence is interesting. Now, you could read my book and have no interest in being around adolescents, and I would understand why. I came straight here from a camp. Melissa picked me up Monday afternoon after I had been 5 days with adolescents at a camp. I had gotten a couple hours of sleep. My back was out. My knees hurt. I'd answered every question 5 million times that was asked. I found kids that ran off. You know, adolescents are full of passion. It's just often misdirected. And so the fun thing about adolescence is, and Kenda Dean writes about this if you're interested in youth ministry stuff, the idea that adolescents have this wild, misdirected passion and a desire to discover their identity and who they are. That's this stage of adolescence. And all those things are important to the church, whether you're interested in hanging out with teenagers or not. And then developmental disabilities, I don't really need to describe. I mean, you could go anywhere on the internet and find a nice definition. But it's a broad term that describes a diverse group of people who often experience difficulties in self-care, mobility, learning, social integration. A group that's not always as good at self-advocating. And those are the folks I spend a lot of my time with. And then discipleship is the other key word. As I understand discipleship, it's inviting people to participate with you in the ongoing redemptive mission of God through Jesus Christ and the power of the Spirit to the full extent of their capacities and limitations. That's everybody. Everybody has limitations. Everybody has capacities. And we are going to now demonstrate that in a way that will make you feel very uncomfortable, but will make me have special joy seeing Hans tried to do this. So we're going to, We're going to do a dance that we do with the kids that I work with, some of whom can't stand up to dance. So how do we include everybody? Well, if you have a lap or part of a lap, you can participate in this dance. It's called the Dum Dum Dottie. We do it at a hoedown, all right? You're really looking at me like you're nervous about this. And that's all right, because this is the way I'm engaging you early, so I know you'll be listening. All right, so you'll start. It has a rhythm to it that goes a song, all right? Brilliant lyrics. The lyrics are this. Dum dum dotty dotty dum dum dotty, verse 2. Dum dum dotty dotty dum dum dotty, verse 3. Dum dum dotty dotty dum dum dotty dotty, then you bring it home. Dum dum dotty dotty dum dum dum. All right, and what you're doing is you have to ask first if you can borrow the lap of the person next to you, and if there's no one next to you, that's okay. Once accidentally called it a lap dance. That was bad. You don't want to do that. All right? That's bad. So you're going to start, and this is why I should have put on that other mic, on your lap. So it goes dum, dum, now to the side. Dotty, dotty, dum, dum, dotty. Dum, dum, dotty, dotty, dum, dum, dotty. Dum, dum, dotty, dotty, dum, dum, dotty, dotty, dum, dum, dotty, dotty, dum, dum, dum. So that's step one. Now see, we all can participate in that. If you just have a lap, you can participate. It gets a little more difficult when you go from lap to shoulders, lap to head, to the rhythm. So dum, dum, dotty, dotty, dum, dum, dotty, dum, dum, dotty, dotty, dum, dum, dotty. We'll pick it up. Dum, dum, dotty, dotty, dum, dum, dotty, dotty, dum, dum, dotty, dotty, dum, dum, dum. So now we're going to see, as some people might fall out as we make it more intense. We've all done this. Have you done it to a rhythm and switched? Dum, dum, dotty, dotty, dum, dum, dotty, switch. Dum, dum, dotty, dotty, dum, dum, dotty. A lot of rubbed heads. Dum, dum, dotty, dotty, dum, dum, dotty, dotty, dum, dum, dotty, dotty, dum, dum, dum. Here's the last one, I promise. If you have protective eyewear, now's the time to use it. You go from your lap. Then you take your right hand, grab your left ear. Take your left hand, grab your middle nose. All right? Then down. Then you switch. Left hand, right ear. Right hand, other middle nose. And down. We'll go very slow and pick it up. I notice Hans is taking pictures now. You guys notice that? You must have known this was coming. So we go. Dum, dum, dotty, dotty, dum, dum, dotty, dum, dum, dotty, dotty, dum, dum, dotty, dum, dum, dotty, dotty, dum, dum, dotty, dotty, dum, dum, dotty, dotty, dum, dum. There you go. Good job. So we had about 3 people with us when we got to the end. So everybody else is severely disabled, right? Is that how it works or not? No, I mean, there's just, so you can participate in that at any level, but you can participate in anything at any level, as so far as your capacities allow you to participate. And when we're talking about things of the kingdom of God, we're talking about a God who gifts us to do things that are beyond coordination. You know, so that's pretty exciting. So that's what I get to see all the time, and that's what I'm going to talk about. What motivates this line of questioning is this: why should Matt have to sit alone? Matt's a kid with Asperger's. If you were to spend time with him, you're going to hear a lot about Halo, which is an interstellar first-person shooter game. Not my thing. He's going to have a notebook this thick of complex storylines that will be bionicle YouTube videos. Again, not my thing. He is aware enough to know that he doesn't really fit in with the people in the special ed classroom that are sitting with the teacher. He has a sense that he's somehow different from them. He doesn't know how to put words to it, but he has a sense that he's somehow different. So he tries to find a place to sit in the lunchroom, but he also realizes he doesn't fit in at the lunch table. So when I go to visit him for lunch this day, he's at a table made to hold 12 to 16 people sitting by himself. And I go to sit next to him, and the first thing he says to me is, "This is a table for misfits." And I said, "Well, I'm 43 years old. I'm bald. I have a visitor tag on. And I'm dressed way too nice to be in school, so thanks for saving me a seat." And so we start talking, and I find out, he says, "Well, I thought it would be different when I got to high school. You know, people pick on me, they make fun of me, no one wants to be my friend." And he's saying this so loud, everybody around us can hear him, but no one argues the point because they don't want to be his friend. This was 2 years ago. The other question is, how do you disciple Spencer? Poor Spencer has, and I say poor Spencer because of the family situation he's been through. Now, he has Asperger's, but he also has a brother with bipolar and some other mental health issues who has abused him. And his brother lived away for a couple years, and then money ran out, you know, whatever they had to go through to get the money to be able to have him there. You know, it's the other problem. Labels, which we're going to talk about. Labels. This happened when we first got here. When Melissa and I first got here, the first thing we got here for was lunch on Tuesday. And we're eating with a wonderful couple who's here, and they started telling us about our son. And the first thing they started telling us was the things that their son, medical diagnosis. And then they paused and took a breath. Nope. And then they started telling me all the wonderful things that their son does, right? That's the struggle that parents are going through all the time, because you got to describe the difficulties and medical conditions to get the support that you need. So you have to present your child one way here, but that's not who you see in your child. And you don't want to talk this way about your child, because the way you speak of your child is how you imagine your child and think of your child. So you want to speak about the possibilities of your child. So when you have a kid like Spencer and you're thinking about discipleship, not only does he have Asperger's, which opens up all sorts of ways of knowing that I'm not attuned to. So it's kind of neat, but it is a difficulty in making friends socially. But he also has post-traumatic stress disorder, because his brother in the room next door, locked in his room, says, "I'm going to kill you," and punches a hole through the wall, and his hand is coming through the wall. Where's your safe space now? The lunchroom's not a safe space. The places where Spencer gets to interact with other people are the places that have the least structure and supervision. The hallway between classes, the lunchroom, gym class. Well, that's a nightmare for poor Spencer. And then he's a guy who is petrified of bugs. I mean, he has so many things that kids could pick on him for. Just so many things. And a speech impediment as well. Well, practical theology is the tool that I use for that one. Practical theology is theological reflection on the practice of the church in light of our calling to bear witness to the redemptive presence of God. Again, as I understand it, it's theological reflection on the practice of the church in light of our calling to bear witness to the redemptive presence of God. It's contextual, it's conversational. But the big problem that these guys have is my very patriotic friend Cody should be coming up here. There he is. The biggest problem that these guys have is that they are disconnected. And that is a spiritual problem. How do I know it's a spiritual problem? Because I paid attention to the morning meditation yesterday, which began, "Good and gracious God, teach us your ways, make us mindful of our sure and powerful connection to one another and to you." This sense of being connected to God, being connected to creation, being connected to others is a spiritual issue. And when you're disconnected and lonely, it's hard to understand a loving God. For Spencer, the context in which discipleship is going to occur is a life that's largely disconnected from the roles, relationships, and social context that provide meaning in most folks' lives. So Spencer and his friends have been dissed. This is a word that you'll hear a lot around younger kids. Dissed. You dissed me. What does it mean? It means disrespectful ultimately, but I play with that. So from a youth ministry standpoint, and this is neat, it's fun for me that this book has been out a couple weeks and it's already getting some attention. So the Princeton Forum on Youth Ministry and some other places are asking me to come because of this one point that I made. If 17% of children younger than 18 have a developmental disability, and if approximately 1 in 88 children are diagnosed with some form of autism, if you're serious about youth ministry, then you need to think about how you're going to create a space in which these folks will feel welcome and can exercise their giftedness. But what's happened, even in our churches, is these kids have been disabled, disconnected, disrespected due to largely impairments in social skill deficits. So something needs to change. The spiritual problem that they're dealing with is this aching emptiness. Labels, again, labels. One of the people that's helping us while our kids are away, while we're away and our kids are at home, is my able-bodied Protestant white upper middle class friend with psoriasis, Bryce, who, isn't that stupid? I mean, who would do that? Why would you say that? Why would you explain someone that way? It's the same thing when we explain people with disability, the medical diagnosis first or something like that. We wed it completely to who they are in terms of identity for some kids. And it is to a degree, but let them decide how it is. Because when we have labels, they cut short how you're being introduced to the person. I think God gives people with psoriasis a special measure of joy. God gives us flaky people like Bryce for the strengthening of our faith. I think to teach us something of endurance. His ability to endure his flaky skin feeds my soul like manna from heaven. But our friends with, particularly a lot of kids I'm around with Asperger's, they lack peer relationships. They have few durable friendships. That is, they might be in the class with someone and near someone, but they're not going to see them anytime other than that or later on. Their families are spiritual nomads. One Johnny and Friends study suggests that 95% of families with members with disabilities don't attend church. Disconnected and lonely. What's the big deal about loneliness? Well, loneliness is the fear of rejection and negative evaluation that produces anxiety and diminishes optimism and self-esteem. A fear of rejection and negative evaluation, it produces anxiety that diminishes optimism and self-esteem. A report in the Annals of Behavioral Medicine concluded chronic perceived isolation or loneliness is characterized by impairments in attention, cognition, affect, behavior. It takes a toll on morbidity and mortality through their impact on genetic, neural, and hormonal mechanisms. We're social creatures, and we simply can't live life if we're disconnected. So our spiritual lives are not something separate from the rest of our lives. James Lynch could write about the broken heart and document the medical consequences of loneliness. He focused on heart disease. But a question I hear working with kids with autism and Asperger's is, well, they don't seem lonely. Don't they like to be alone? Has anybody heard that one before? Yeah. And so, do they feel isolated? Do they have that sense of feeling isolated? I thought they preferred that. According to one study in the Journal of Autism and Developmental Disorders, 59% of adolescents with autism spectrum disorder reported either always feeling lonely or feeling lonely sometimes, as compared to 23% of their typically developing peers, of whom only 4% said they always felt lonely. So yes, the answer is yes. People with Asperger's and autism are feeling that disconnected, and it's having consequences. And I've met a lot of depressed parents and depressed kids. This is an interesting fact. Loneliness has consequences. People who are socially isolated face a higher mortality risk than those who smoke. Another problem is people with disabilities are often socially disembodied. So they have no partners, workplace, community associations, involvements. So they don't see themselves out there. And what was talked about with television representation of people with disabilities factors into that as well. And this was one of the saddest things. In one study, only 53% had either no or only one close friend, and 35% of those spend less than 1 hour a week outside of school with friends. So it is a spiritual issue. Connectedness is an expression of the spiritual dimension of life. Michael Buchanan's done a lot of study on this. The spiritual has come to be understood in terms of connectedness or relationships an individual has with self, others, the world, and God. And it's an underappreciated aspect of the biblical healing narratives, which we talked about to some degree. If you talk to Candida Moss, who was here, is a New Testament scholar. If you talk about the issue of blood, the woman with the issue of blood in Jesus, she's going to talk about porosity, and Jesus has pores through which his power leaks, and she has pores through which she's made unclean, but it also gives her access to God's power through Jesus, and she can bring it up. But if you talk to me about it, you're going to hear about a woman with an issue of blood who was excluded from community because she had stigma associated with her. And after she touches the hem of Jesus, Jesus gives her the opportunity to bear witness to what's happened. And Jesus, in affirming that, now welcomes her into the community from which she's been excluded. And the lepers who are healed by Jesus are not just healed and go merrily along, but they go show themselves to the priest, and through being declared clean or given a pathway back to being included and reconnected to community. I think that as a church, we're strategically placed to address this issue of disconnected and lonely friends with developmental disabilities. So if we think about circle of relationships for our typically developing kids, and John Elder Robeson. Anybody heard of John Elder Robeson? No, you're going to in a second. He calls them NYPICAL, neurotypical, NYPICALs. So these are our NYPICALs. They have their family, that we'll call a circle of intimacy. And they have folks they do stuff with, their circle of friendship. They have opportunities to participate in events in the community through which they form an identity and develop these friendships deeper. And a circle of exchange. They have places that they go and purchase things and participate in the larger community that way. And these are our NYPICAL friends. Our friends with developmental disabilities, there's a lot of strain on the family. I have disability scoop is one of the things that pops up on my computer screen often among my little Mac tiles. I don't know what any of that stuff's called. I just know it's easy to click on things and it's addictive. But this disability scoop had 2 articles on this. One, stress on mothers with children with autism, comparable to that of combat soldiers. Another, 30% of fathers with grown children with autism have depression that merits clinical attention. So, yes, families are strained, for sure. And I can't tell you, well, I could, I guess, if I counted and thought about it. I'll just say a large number of the families that are involved with our program have single parents. And it was not uncommon. I mean, I could think of at least 4 off the top of my head where as soon as the child was born, the father's gone. So there's stress on the family. So in the circle of intimacy, it's not always the case, but it often is. Circle of friendship, again, this is just to be more dramatic, but there aren't as many friends, not as many places to make friends because there aren't as many opportunities available. And the circle of exchange is often related to therapy or cure instead of just fun stuff. Now this is, of course, it's different with every kid and every situation, but the reason I show you this is because I think our churches, I'm speaking from a Christian background in case you haven't figured out, so you can apply it how you want across the board. I think it works. But our churches are strategically placed in that circle of participation to create a space, a hospitable space, a place where they can be connected, where friendships can be developed, where they can be involved in the larger community, where they can continue to develop their sense of identity. So our solution then, what is our solution to this problem of disconnection and loneliness as a church? Well, this is John Elder Robeson. He's written a couple books. One of them is a great title, Look Me in the Eyes. Anybody have friends with autism? Yeah? Look me in the eyes? That's brutal. They don't want to do that. They don't want to look you in the eyes. And so teachers and other people think, oh, well, they're not paying attention. They're not doing it. My son was that way, and so I'd give him like things to play with and manipulate that would occupy part of his mind, so the rest of his mind could be on the lesson. And I don't care what he's looking at. He's going to get something. But look me in the eyes. His solution for folks with Asperger's, which is what he has in autism, is make yourself choosable. He said, a lot of things I did, I realize now, just push people away. I said weird stuff. If a girl kind of liked me, I'd say bow, wow, wow at her, and that didn't work well. Didn't help endear me. If I broke a vase and somebody said, oh, that's just great, then not being able to read sarcasm or faces or things like that, he'd say, oh, well, I could break another one. He felt pretty good about himself. He didn't realize until much later, when he could read body language and had a friend get close enough to share with him, that you have Asperger's, and it makes the way that you perceive the world different. It helped because you could look at electronics and figure them out and never grow tired. You could feel music. You could see music in ways that other people couldn't. And you could spend hours upon hours upon hours upon hours. And he ended up making a lot of the stuff that Kiss used, which is pretty cool. Flaming guitars and lights that follow patterns, and did very well. Now he's a mechanic who works on only very expensive, nice cars. And he's brilliant mechanic. So he had these gifts, as a result of his Asperger's, because of the way that he perceived the world and lived in the world. But he also had capacities to understand himself beyond a lot of the friends that I work with. He could read books about how he's being perceived, and he could say, even though I don't feel this, I can know this is what I'm supposed to say in this situation. This is what I'm supposed to do in this situation. This will not win me friends. So he said, if I could just make myself choosable. And that's what he does in Be Different. That's sort of his solution. I'll just make myself choosable. But what you see all throughout his book is this overwhelming, both books, an overwhelming desire to be connected to others, and the loneliness and self-esteem problems that comes from being disconnected is the theme of his life. His solution, make yourself choosable. Stop doing annoying things. But that solution is not valid for the church. The church isn't going to go. That's not fair. That's his solution. He came up with it. That's okay. The church can't say people with Asperger's and autism, Down syndrome, make yourselves more choosable. That's ridiculous. And in the second book that I just showed you, this one, Be Different, which could be useful for certain people. And it's all fun reading. If you have friends with Asperger's, you see him in there, the way he responds, the way he thinks. It's very helpful. But he says this: for a relationship to succeed, both people must choose each other. And it has to start with someone. I must choose you, or you must choose me. It doesn't matter who makes the initial approach. And so I believe that this is a doctrine of election that works for Wesleyans, Methodists, and Presbyterians. Being chosen as a friend is a legitimate way to enter into friendship. In other words, we can disciple. When you think about ministry and discipleship with adolescents with developmental disabilities, you're not thinking of ministry and discipleship only to adolescents with developmental disabilities. You're thinking of creating an atmosphere by training all adolescents that there's value in diversity, that people are worth getting knowing, that you can encounter Christ in everyone you reach, and you're creating practices of hospitality in which everyone's included. So if I want to change the lunchroom for Matt, I don't want to teach Matt some social skills. It'd be nice if he learned some. That would be helpful. He'd be easier to talk to. But if I want to change the lunchroom for him, I have to find a group of high school kids who I can invest time in and pray with and transform the way that they see Matt. And they can elect Matt as a friend. And that's a legitimate way to start friendship. 2 years ago, I saw Matt. He was sitting alone, and he said, "This is a table for misfits." The last week of school, I went to visit him. He had 4 people at his lunch table. His demeanor's changed. He's doing better in school. If you want to take his IEP, right, things that you want him to achieve in school, he's reached many of those things because of what's happened in his spiritual life and feeling connected, confident. He's not worried about making mistakes anymore. If I make a mistake in this social situation, it's over. I've made so many, I don't even want to try. If I make a mistake in this social situation, I have 5 friends. They're still going to be here. I can say stupid stuff. I can mess up. It's okay. So make yourself choosable is fine for him, but that's not an adequate answer for the church. For the church, the answer is choose. Elect to be involved in the lives of people with developmental disabilities. So Spencer, how do we disciple Spencer? When your life circumstances are what I was telling you about, how do you learn to trust, believe, and share? How do you learn these sorts of things? We can't learn to follow Christ outside of a larger system of living. So trust is understood experientially. It's not going to be a lesson on trust. He's not going to memorize verses on trust. He's going to have to feel it in his body. What are we going to give him that's going to counteract the hand coming through the wall of his bedroom? I don't think that Xavier, Patrick, Spencer, and Brittany are going to make themselves chosen necessarily. These are just friends of mine. Someone's going to choose them. And what I've found very useful has been creating a place for them to connect with others through developing a ministry that we do things that they're able to do well, and we surround them with peers who are committed to them. And then we surround that with college-age folks and adults. So we develop a group of peers who view relationships as sacramental, not instrumental, and can transform the culture of a lunchroom and give Matt a place to feel connected. We impact the places they spend the majority of their time. We create a culture of love and acceptance that transfers into their school and home, and peer volunteers are the key. I'm going to tell you about this, but he does all the stuff on peer stuff, so you can go get some of the Eric Carter stuff on peers. That's kind of his thing. What can peers do? Well, peer friendships, just on a basic level, they lessen the likelihood of being victimized or bullied, which everybody's talking about nowadays. Having even one friend mitigates the negative impact of rejection because you have some sort of connection, so you're never completely disconnected. It moves kids from being integrated physically to being accepted and valued. And, now this is secondary to being included. It's a safe setting to develop interpersonal skills. Do you see the difference there? You're not developing interpersonal skills so that you can be part of a group. You're being elected and chosen and loved. Now you have a safe place to develop interpersonal skills. And peers have more of an impact than paid assistance or adult supports, including often parents, because they're part of the high school social world. I'm learning. My kids now, this is so frustrating, right? They're 16, 13, the two oldest are, and I'm not their favorite person anymore. I'm not as wise as I used to be. This is true of all adolescents as they're forming their identity. They're looking for models. I mean, one week, this is their identity. The next week, it's a different one. They're trying on different ones. They need safe settings to do that. Particularly our friends with developmental disabilities who don't have as many markers. You know the markers that you had? Tell me the markers you had as a kid. Just somebody throw out a marker. Sort of a developmental marker, I'm growing older marker. Just give me one.
High heels.
High heels.
Independence.
Driving. Confirmation. So certain things that we assume as just part of growing up that we have, often that include being able to go independently somewhere, aren't part of their lives necessarily. So they're trying to look for different markers of how am I getting older, how am I moving from this to that. And peers can help them with that. But it is mutual. It's mutuality is an important word in our ministry because it's ministry to one another. It's not ministry to them. It's how we minister together. A fine example of that is is, I don't know, I'm not the most, I don't ooze with compassion. You know, I've cried a couple times. It's very, I mean, people will be telling me horrible stories, and I really do feel, I just don't know how to show it, you know, and if I did, I would, but I'm not very good at it. And so when you have a kid with a developmental disability who's very homesick, I stink at helping. I mean, I've been through seminary, and I've taken pastoral counseling courses, and I have kids of my own, and I can relate to how they're feeling, but I'm horrible. Well, a friend of mine with Down syndrome goes up to him, puts his arm around him, and suddenly they're calm. You understand, that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about gift. That's what I'm talking about. That's something that our community needs that I don't have. It's something that the Spirit brings that this person has. Now, I'd be doomed without it. This kid would be crying for 3 days and have a horrible time. But because Bo sees a need, goes and puts his arm around him, everything's changed. So it's a two-way street. What can our friends with disabilities do for their peers? Well, there's all sorts of spiritual gifts that everybody has that they can employ if they have a place to do it. But beyond that, by spending times with kids with whom they would not otherwise have personally encountered, they increase the diversity of their relationships, and that helps with their personal growth and development. The way that they view the world changes, their worldview. They gain new respect for their friends. One thing that we do with our kids is therapeutic horseback riding. My wife is some sort of, what do you call it, program director? Executive director. She's always with horses. I don't know. She's called something. Whatever it is, it's really important though. It's better than my title. It's better than my title. And so whatever it is she's called, I know what she does. What she does is she works with riders. She doesn't work with disabled riders. In fact, one of her riders, Alexander, who happens to have Asperger's, gave me a lesson. Now, he's not very good at seeing in my mind and understanding the things I'm worried about as I'm riding a horse. He just says, go do 20-meter circles. Go do 20-meter circles. I don't know what a 20-meter circle is. I don't know why I'm doing a 20-meter circle. And then I'm not doing, well, at one point the horse isn't doing something right. Well, Alexander says, well, here's how you do it. The horse said, thank you, Alexander. But when our typically developing peers see their friends succeed on horses riding, well, that changes the way that they view them. They start to see their potential, their possibilities, right? And yes, within that safe setting now, they both acquire new interpersonal skills. In other words, it's not just the person with the developmental disability acquiring new interpersonal skills. It's learning how to communicate in a number of different ways. I communicate different to Alexander than I do to Brittany, than I do to Bo, than I do to Hans, than I do to John. There's different ways of communicating. It involves a more holistic understanding of the other person. That you communicate 750 ways other than the words that you choose. That you communicate from a certain distance and with inflection. That you communicate with your face. That you communicate with touch or without touch. And sometimes your touch feels like a slap, even though it's just a gentle touch. And your whisper feels like a yell, even though it's just a whisper. So we have to know who we're talking to. So it increases their interpersonal skills and makes them better communicators and more thoughtful communicators. The two primary practices that we participate in together are hospitality and friendship. And I think these are practices that connect and teach trust. And when I say practices, I'm talking about things that the church participates in, given to us from God, hospitality. The hospitality in the garden. The garden's created. Adam and Eve have hospitality. That's a beautiful thing. And we've understood hospitality theologically. We've understood it historically. There's a history of hospitality, and we can look at hospitality on the pilgrimages and how the monasteries welcomed people and provided for them to support them in their pilgrimages. We can also see the commodification of hospitality. If you come visit me in Williamsburg, you could stay in the hospitality house, and they will give you as much hospitality as you pay for. Right? Because hospitality's been commodified. So we see how, and I'm not saying that structure in of itself, that retail business and hospitality industry is sinful, but it's interesting. It's why you can get into a sports bar and maybe not have access into a church, because they want you there because they can sell you something. Hospitality has a social aspect. We learn it from others. It addresses a fundamental human need, our interdependence, that we are interdependent. We're not fundamentally independent monads, but we're independent. So hospitality is a Christian practice. And we work at it together and transform it from its history in the present for the sake of the future. So that's hospitality. It has a historical, social, universal. Hospitality looks one way. Everywhere you can recognize what hospitality is, but hospitality looks different here than it does perhaps in Malawi. And the most important thing now about a Christian practice is it's participatory knowledge. In other words, there's knowledge that comes from being received by another or receiving Christ in the other. Participatory knowledge that's only available by participating in that practice. That's hospitality. So hospitality and friendship are keys. Look at that. So interesting story. One of the things we did with our group is our group, which is mainly adolescents, decided we wanted to serve our community. That's right. Adolescents with developmental disabilities, serving the community. Exactly. Yes, we can do that. And so we said, well, here's what we're going to do. For the ARC of Greater Williamsburg, which is it's what the letters stand for is still, you can't say those anymore, but it is adults with intellectual disabilities. We're going to throw a 50s dance. We're going to practice, we've been practicing hospitality together. We're going to practice hospitality on a large scale. So the kids made the hors d'oeuvres. We made name tags. We found out everybody who was coming. It was over 100 people. We made sure each of them had a name tag. We decorated this gym, 50s style. As people came in, we made sure we welcomed them. We made sure that if they needed someone to dance with, we were there. And then at some point, they sang the servant song. Will you let me be your servant? Let me be as Christ to you. Pray that I might to let you be my servant too. Great song. And then one of our kids got up there and shared what he understood the hospitality of God to be, how he'd been received by God, and how God loves them as well and has open arms. Not the best orator I've ever heard, but one of the best communicators I've ever seen. Absolutely genuine and authentic in the way that he communicated, and he related to everybody in a way that I could not have possibly done. I'm making that point again. Giftedness. He had a giftedness for communicating in that setting that I did not have. That was 2 years ago. Incredible experience. Fast forward, this summer we had a camp. We had a new kid, never been to anything before, decides to come with us to a 3-day, 2-night camp. I'm dumb. I decided to let him come because you never know what could happen. I haven't seen him in other settings. Is he okay overnight? Does he have attachment issues? What's going on? We let him come. He has a great time. It's incredible. Alexis's mom says, you had a new kid come, right? Yeah, we did. Skittles. That's what we call them, Skittles. Did Skittles have fun? Yeah. Did he feel included? Yeah, he felt included. Did you include him? Dumb, Mom. We practice hospitality. To her, in other words, she's learned it. She's learned it. This is fundamental to who she is as a Christian. That, yeah, of course we included this person. Of course we made them feel comfortable. That's hospitality. The other is friendship. Friendship is interesting because now friend is a verb. You can friend someone. So, friends. But friend is also a label. But friend is a label that gives life. The knowledge that another person wants to be with one, spend time and do things together out of affection or by choice is a powerful affirmation of one's worth and value. That's from an article called A Feeling of Being Connected by a man or woman whose name I can't pronounce or tell if it's a man or woman. Latvia, Zena Latvia. You know that person? You'll know her now because that's one of the best quotes I've heard on that. The knowledge that another person wants to be with one, spend time, and do things together out of affection or by choice is a powerful affirmation of one's worth and value. Choosing to give kids with developmental disabilities a new label, friend. Those are just pictures of some of the kids who are involved, enjoying each other as friends. Something that we could talk about later, because I think my time's up, right? Pretty much? Someone close to up? Yeah. I could go on another 2 hours, but something that we could talk about is what are some specific things that we do with kids. We could talk about that in the group, some of the things we do to teach prayer. You could bring ideas, and we could just have a discussion. We could also talk about this. Horses are magical. I don't know if you guys know that, but it's true. Research confirms it. Just horses are magical. What a great way to learn to embody trust. Then you're on a horse with a horse leader who's leading you. You have sidewalkers to make sure you're not falling off. You have reins to control the horse. You have to learn to trust your seat, trust the reins, trust the sidewalkers, trust the horse leader, trust the instructor. You feel trust in your body. It's a very powerful way to communicate the feeling of trust and then tie that to some of the biblical narratives. But we've had horses. This is why I would include all of God's creation in this guy right here. This good and gracious God, teach us your ways, make us mindful of our sure and powerful connection to one another, to you, and I would add to all creation. I don't have the authority to do that, but I did. Because there was a time when it was a horse that provided the calming that I couldn't provide for one kid. A horse that provided confidence that I couldn't offer, and a horse that provided the context in which a kid said his first words ever. A horse that provided the place where core strength was increased and a leg stopped dragging from behind. So partners with us in ministry. So for more on this stuff, yes, I wrote that. I got like 3 copies with me. I think we have a couple spoken for. What's next? I wrote about this a little in the blog, and I heard someone say they were going to put an icon up here for something else. Did you? Which one did you bring?
St. Luke.
Okay. Now, St. Luke's a good one for what I'm talking about, because this is attributed to St. Luke. The Oda Gretria, this idea of this image, what we have is Mary showing the way, she who shows the way, pointing to Jesus. And Luke, in Luke's gospel, paints a verbal picture of Mary as the one who shows the way. But the point I want to make about this and how this relates to youth ministry with kids with developmental disabilities is that, one, icons in general create spaces in which you can freely encounter the stories. Depending on where you fit on in terms of orthodoxy, windows into the kingdom of heaven. There's certain things, the materials used for making an icon are all natural from the mineral, plant, or organic world. They're sanctified, gathered together, and strategically placed, called to participate in the transfiguration of the cosmos. In this way, the icon offers us an image of theosis, union with God, a life overwhelmed by the divine. In the incarnation, God became human that humans might participate in the divine life. The icon bears witness to what is really real. It's a window into the kingdom of heaven, offers a hopeful picture of the sanctified life. But the power of the icon's witness comes from the Spirit of God and from its natural elements being replaced in right relationship with one another. While Jesus is the archetypical icon of God, the image of the invisible God, we participate in Christ by the Spirit and together bear his image as the body of Christ. So if we can think of God as our iconographer, then each person with their unique lines, textures, gestures, colors, capacities, and impairments, when called to the service of the Spirit, is able to contribute to the iconic witness of the church. The iconic witness is more about divine replacement and the power of the Spirit than it is about rational capacity, purposive agency, moral responsibility, or capacity for creativity, which is usually associated with image of God thinking. No body is impaired such that they can't bear witness to the Spirit, and they shouldn't be disabled by not being given a place in our congregation. It could be argued that the absence of people with disabilities in our congregation diminishes the fitness of our witness. So that's it.
Thank you, Ben. I think you remind us of at least two things. One is that for all of our youth, and particularly youth with developmental disabilities, there's a fundamental difference between just being present and having a presence, and we can make that difference. And then that image of sitting alone in our communities, no one should be sitting alone, literally or in any other way. And you give us some ideas for moving on that. We have a few minutes for some questions, and the mic will kind of come around.
Right, and
Yeah.
then also I'm leading a discussion group, so a lot of questions. If you don't think it's something everybody's interested in, then we can meet and discuss. But
Ben, I think part of the beauty of that was actually engaging in the school environment. So, because a lot of the teens with developmental disabilities may not be in our faith communities anyway, and a big part of their world is the school environment. How are you able to engage your ministry with the nippers, the nips?
Nipicals.
Nipicals, okay. I knew nips, and I neurotypicals, but anyway. How do you engage with them in the school environment?
It depends on, you have to be aware of what the rules are for the school. So what are you coming in there for? So what are the parameters, what are the boundaries? So there's schools that say we don't want anything religious in the school because if we let one thing in, we let everything in, and we're very protective of kids, to which I say, great, I agree. But I can go to sporting events and find out where their hangouts are outside of that. But most schools say, we don't know what we're doing and we need help. And so I did an internship with one student where he actually got out of school for a couple hours, and we went over leadership principles. We read Henry Nouwen's In the Name of Jesus as a book of leadership, and we talked about how to interact with folks and get more people involved. Once you have one kid involved who's willing to be a friend, and somebody sees that, then other people are interested, and they're really not that hard to find. So access to the school, the way that they allow you to. So at one high school, I can go to lunch anytime I want. At most of the high schools in Williamsburg, I can go to lunch and sit with kids that I already know. And I say, I'm not here to recruit kids and evangelize and proselytize. I'm here to model friendship. And they say, well, come on, please. And that's it. That is what I'm doing. That is what I'm doing.
So you start with kids maybe you know from faith communities?
Definitely. That's the easiest place to start.
I'm Christine Guth. I have 2 young adult children with Asperger's syndrome, so I have been through fairly recently watching the process you described not happen with my children. And I felt like I was ready to bawl when you were describing this, because I know that's what they need. I know that's what these adolescents need. I'm currently working with parents, 400 or so parents in our community who long for those kinds of opportunities for their adolescents. And I've also witnessed youth ministers who have their set ways of doing things, and they see the problem of my children's disengagement as lodged in my child, and not something. How do you reach? Do you have any insights for reaching and inspiring youth ministers to try some of the things you're talking about?
Yeah, that's why I wrote the book, one, and then I'm accepting any offer I have. Like Youth Worker Magazine isn't the place I'd usually write something, but I wrote a blog, and they're doing something on the book. And that reaches some certain youth workers. And then Immerse is another journal that's more theologically minded, and I wrote something for Immerse, which, by the way, someone wrote not a response or something, but like a going deeper with my article that I'd appreciate if any of you would go and tear apart, because he clearly doesn't understand disability, and I don't want to be the one to do it. So if any of you want to go to the Immerse website and pick on him, I'd appreciate it. But then the Princeton Forum is another place where some of these folks, but I'm trying to get to, like, normally you won't believe this, but I am somewhat reclusive. I control this. See, I made you guys do ridiculous stuff. I control it, so I'm not intimidated to be here, but approach me and try to talk to me, and you've used up about 70% of my energy for the day to maintain that conversation. I'm a terrible introvert. So I usually don't pursue things like that. But with this is what I'm saying I think everybody needs to hear. So I'm very passionate about this. So I think this is hopefully going to start literature and a discussion about this. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get a discussion going. And now the other thing I'm doing is, because of my bizarre interests, right, I'm more likely to get a missiology position than I am a disability studies position, than I am a Christian ed position, than I am a practical theology position. But I'm conversant in all those. So I'm trying to bring this discussion into all those different spheres that don't often interact. And so I'm trying to get practical theology, missiology, Christian ed, everybody to talk about it. Yes?
I mean, one of the things I think that's important about your book, and the way I've been describing it since last year to people, is the book is not about ministries to youth with intellectual and developmental disabilities. It's about good youth ministry, period. Mm-hmm. So because the same kinds of issues about, there's not kids with IDDD who are the only ones who don't have friends.
Right.
And those kinds of, do I fit in, all that kind of stuff is going on about being judged and so on. So it's, one of the things that's neat, I think, about it is to say to people, this is not just about this, it's about something that's good for everybody, which is part of what all of us believe. The other thing I think is fascinating that you didn't talk a lot about, and it's also fascinating because of the connection between your book and Anna Kate Shirley's dissertation, is that both of you use BART as a major conversational partner. And as a basis for what you're doing. And I wondered if you'd just say a bit more about how you've taken Bart's doctrine of election and applied it.
Sure. Do you guys really want to know that? That's more my first book is called Practicing Witness, and it's about looking at the Christian practices discussion through missional theology. And I studied under Darrell Guter, and that was his thing, missional theology. And he's nuts about Bart, almost to his detriment sometimes, because he has some neat things to say. I think he could say differently. I guess I should tell him that instead of you. But Bart's doctrine of election is not placed somewhere in a dark world before God that somehow handicaps God and what God can do. But the doctrine of election is in the doctrine of reconciliation. So justification, sanctification, and election or calling or vocation are all tied together. And so So there's no participation in Christ without participating in the ongoing redemptive mission of Christ, largely. So that's what election is. It's stuff you've heard before. You're elected with a trajectory, and then you're given the gifts that you need to do that. Is that enough of that for the Bart stuff, or did you want me to do more? I mean,
Let people decide.
all right.
Maybe one more question.
Yes, sure. One more question.
How
Yeah.
do you get, I know when you're younger, elementary school age, kids are more maybe ready to be a peer, but when you get to the junior high, high school age, it seems like how do you get buy-in from others to really embrace, work together? I mean, they have to be somehow moved in touch. So
Right.
you're working to reach out as an adult to a person with disabilities, but how do you get everyone to work together to see that they're blessed, or however, whatever language you use?
Sure. So the question is, most friendships are established and patterns of friendships are established in grade school. By then you already have best friends, you already have patterns of making friendships. And when you get to be an adolescent and you're insecure about who you are in the first place, how are you going to get someone to go beyond that? How are you going to reach people who are going to go beyond their own struggles to identify their own identity and reach out to someone else? And that's why it is good to start in churches and youth groups where they've made some sort of profession of faith and have some sense of identity that's tied to their identity in Christ. But the truth of the matter is, if you can have one model for them to look at, you can change the way a school thinks. So Ben Colley just participated in the Olympic trials for swimming. And he also was all-state in basketball. And aside from that, he's a generally nice guy. I just got to know him, played him in basketball. We got to be friends. He can recruit more people than I can. People are much more interested in being around Ben Colley than they are Ben Connor when they're in high school. So again, the whole peer thing is the way you get more peers. You just get one and pray and show them a vision for what could be. That's it. Thank you.